Thank you to everyone joining us today from across the United States and all around the world. My name is Grant Frailich, Member Success Manager here at Conscious Capitalism, Inc. And on behalf of the entire CCI team, we appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn and grow in community with us. Today, we are excited for a conversation with one of our Senior Leader Network members, CEO of the Branded Group and author, Michael Kurland, about his recently released book, Broken to Better, 13 Ways Not to Fail at Life and Leadership. And we're going to hear his insights into conscious leadership. As many of you know, conscious capitalism is a philosophy that emphasizes the human nature of business, as well as a movement of business leaders from around the world working to change the practice and perception of capitalism as a means to elevate humanity. Conscious Capitalism, Inc. is a nonprofit organization dedicated to catalyzing that movement by creating learning opportunities like today's session and building systems of support for practicing conscious capitalists through our Senior Leader Network membership and engagement with our local chapters. Several times a month, we also offer these virtual gatherings as a way for our community to see how this philosophy takes space in the leadership journeys and the business practices of those in our network. Today's gathering is going to run for about 45 minutes. We'll be in conversation with Michael for about 25 minutes, and then we'll transition to audience questions during the last 10 to 15 minutes of our session. Please feel free to use the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. We will try to get to as many of your questions as we can during our time together. If you have any technical questions or issues, please send us an email to info@consciouscapitalism.org. All of that said, I am honored to welcome our guest, Michael Kurland. Michael is an award-winning CEO of a successful facilities management company, and Michael is committed to leading with purpose and giving back to his community. Michael has more than a decade of sales and marketing experience in facility management. He launched the Branded Group in 2014, and he's led its year-over-year exponential growth, cultural transformation, and he's cultivated a highly regarded team of industry experts. Michael's desire for his company to be better has resulted in deep and long-lasting customer, vendor, and nonprofit partner relationships, and he's designed innovative programs that drive customer satisfaction, and they have developed a respected position in the industry. So Michael, we are so excited to have you here with us today.
Grant, thank you. CCI community, thank you. Really appreciate being here. You just mentioned that I have a decade in the sales and marketing, and I actually did the math. It's almost 2 decades. I am getting old, but I appreciate the nice intro, and thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you for being here. And right off the bat, I know that there are many people on this call who don't know the origins of Branded Group, and they don't know how Be Better came to be. So I'm hoping you could just share your story and tell us a little bit more about Be Better and how you got to the position you're in.
Sure. So kind of back to what I was just saying, I was working in the industry, facilities management at another company for 7 years. And in 2013, we went on this 2012. Let me back up a bit here. 2012, the company went ahead and sold to private equity. Private equity came in and said, we're not going to change anything. And then they changed everything. So that happened throughout the course of 2013. I also started going through a divorce at the year 2012 through the year 2013. And I was just like, man, I don't want to do this anymore. Be in New York, work for this company, be in this marriage. So I was unceremoniously let go at the end of 2013. Side note, the company, my biggest client was Target, and they sent me on December 6th. I'll never forget the date. Flew me to Minnesota. December was already not cool of them to do, but flew me to Minnesota in December. I went and secured a 3-year contract for the old company. That was on a Wednesday. Came back into the office, and on Friday, I got called to the CEO's office and was ushered out that Friday, let go unceremoniously. And was, pretty much at the end of my divorce at that point in time as well. So I went home and I decided I can do this better. I can do this differently. I can do this better. And I can do this from California. So I pretty much packed up everything I had, sold my house to get enough money to start Branded Group, and I drove cross country. Actually got Kira Esposito at the time, now Belanzi, one of my business partners, to agree crazily enough to do this with me. We drove across country and we started Branded Group. And so for the first year of Branded Group, we were doing everything we could just to get by, right? Because you're a startup, you don't know what you don't know. And we actually turned a profit year one. We made about $50,000, and I used to tell that with pride, but in reality, I wasn't taking a salary, so it was pretty much my salary that was the profit that we turned. So we turned a profit year one, and I was just looking at myself in the mirror and like, is this all that there is, right? Is this what it's going to be like? Like, I'm going to turn a profit for fixing toilets for retailers, and that's the legacy I'm leaving on this earth. And I was just like, not happy with that legacy. I wanted to write a different narrative. So we started coming up with, and let's back up a little bit here as well. When we were talking, me and Kira were talking about starting this company, my other business partner, John Thomas, the marketing guru, that's total sarcasm for anyone who knows him. You'll get that. If you don't know him, I'm the marketing guru. So he came up with the phrase "be better," because we would always talk at the last company, we're not paying our vendors on time. We're not paying our employees aren't getting paid we weren't getting paid our commission on time. We were always late to our work orders, and we would tell the customers, oh yeah, there was a car fire. There was no car fire. We were late, right? So John came up with the term, let's be better. And that's our tagline for Branded Group, it's be better. So we were trying to think of a way that we could be better, and how could we put those words into use at the end of year one. And myself and my PR team, which is Jennifer Bernheim, we came up with the Be Better program, and that's really where all this came from. That's the story in a nutshell. We can get into that a little bit further in the show, I'm sure.
No, and I appreciate you sharing the context. I was going to ask about the phrase "be better" because I think a lot of companies tend to overcomplicate that. So I love that you have such a simple, direct tagline, and for lack of a better word, mantra to just fall back on. Be better in everything you do. You touched on this a little bit already, but I would love to hear more about how you, on both a personal level as well as on a professional level, how are you different now than when you first traveled to California to start Be Better and start your company?
How am I different now? Well, even though I've had imposter syndrome for the last month, I am an author now. I am about to be a father. I'm happily remarried to a beautiful woman. And our company has grown over the almost 9 years that we've been in existence, from 2 employees in 2014 to 160 plus right now in 19 different states. So for me, I've had to learn how to be a better leader, how to be more patient, how to bring empathy across 19 different states and 160 employees, and how to bring culture across 19 different states and 160 employees. So I think from a personal and a professional standpoint, just rolling with those punches, that's something that I've learned over the last 9 years. That's how I'm different. It was go 190 miles an hour when we started, and it was on a plane every other week, and go visit this client and shake this guy's hand and close this deal. And I don't even do sales anymore unless I'm requested, which is not very often. I have a whole team that handles that. They fly all over the country. So yeah, just settling down and getting ready for that next chapter in life. Everyone's like, what do you want to do next? What's your next big thing? You've done a great job with the company, and everything you've done since COVID and et cetera, becoming an author. But my next big thing is becoming a father. I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting into, so I'm excited for that.
When is your kiddo due?
It's due. Okay, so I have a big thought process on this. I think that this is just a moving target. Doctors are flying in the dark here. They're like, oh yeah, your last period was this date, 11/4. So 11/4 is the day, But
Okay.
my wife is ready to pop, and she's only 7 months, so I think it's coming sometime in October.
Yeah. I would love to hear a little bit more about the growth of Branded Group. I know you mentioned that first year you turned a profit. I would love to hear a little bit more about years 2 and 3. Did you have this, linear journey of growth, or was it more of a start, stop? What were the challenges you ran into? What did that look like after year 1?
So what we found was putting this, empathy, this conscious capitalism in place, because I read the book early on while we were building the company, and it's gone hand in hand. The growth has been no less than 25% year over year, minus COVID, right? 2020 was the year that we plateaued, and we didn't grow. We actually declined about 9%, but that was all based on fear, right? It was that 2-month gap where from pretty much April and May, where we weren't doing anything. We were furloughing everybody to try and right size the company to figure out where we were at. That 2 months is pretty much what stopped us from probably growing 10% instead of losing 9%. But other than that, we haven't had a year where we haven't grown at least 25% year over year. So
it's amazing. That's impressive.
Thank you.
So 2-part question here. Pre-COVID and then during COVID. Pre-COVID, leading up to 2020, what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned about yourself and about being a CEO? And then the follow-up, what were the biggest lessons that you learned about yourself and about being a CEO during COVID?
So I always had the idea that you had to lead with empathy, and I didn't. That's just me. I'm authentic. That's even when I was back at the old place. I'm like, why aren't we doing these things? Why are we treating employees like commodities? Why are we treating subcontractors like commodities? Why don't we try and work with honey instead of vinegar? And then I started, like I said, I read the E-Myth, I read Conscious Capitalism, and it just further cemented who I was and what I was. And I also, another huge thing that I did that helped me pre-COVID was looking at the TED Talk from Brene Brown, Being Vulnerable. That just, again, cemented who I was. So I was right about all those things, and as I started, my journey, I always treated my employees better, sometimes better than myself. Still to this day, I always treated our subcontractors better, for the most part, right? We paid them on time. We were transparent with them. I always treated our customers, I was transparent with them, and then we started treating ourselves better too. So I was just taking all those lessons and putting them into place. And as I did that over the first, because COVID happened in 2020, so we were, just turned 6 years old. Over the first 6 years, I was rewarded by having that 25% growth every year, right? So I learned that I was right, and to trust who I am, and to keep being the person I am, and to cement these thoughts. And then COVID hit, and you have this year, or basically the last 2.5 years, right? Because we're still kind of out of the woods, or whatever we are now, right? So, and I really went into full empathy mode, because I had a lot of single young millennial employees that were living by themselves. And what we found during COVID was productivity went through the roof because no one had anything else to do, right? But then burnout became this real thing, and trying to make sure we manage that from afar appropriately. And then it was how do you stay in contact with your employees? You do these Zoom happy hours, which the biggest thing I learned, not that anyone's asking about Zoom happy hours, is you get really drunk because you're your own bartender and you have no one to really cut you off, right? So I'm sure some of you guys out there have experienced that. But just trying to stay in touch with these single millennial employees to make sure that they knew you don't have to work 20 hours a week, 20 hours a day. It's going to be okay. So I think I just geared up my empathy even to another level post-COVID. That's what I've learned about myself, to answer your question.
And one of the things that we talk about with conscious capitalism all the time is it's nice to have these tenets and have these principles of conscious capitalism when times are good, but it's essential to lean into them when times are not so good. So I appreciate what you said just about leaning into empathy and leaning into everything that you've already been talking about. I would love to shift a little bit more towards your actual book that just came out. Specifically, you have these 13 Be Better principles. I'm hoping you could just talk a little bit more about what these 13 principles are. And then are there one or two or three that really stand out as personal favorites for you, or, most critical, most essential in your mind?
So, I mean, these are the 13 principles I've learned throughout my journey of the 8.5 years that we've been doing Branded Group, and how to start so what the book's really about, is that okay if I get into that right now? So what the book's really about is like, it's a how-to 101 for a new entrepreneur who's coming on the scene that wants to start a business, and how can you loop purpose into that business, right? And so we started the Be Better podcast about 3 years ago. That was fun. Started the podcast, all jazzed up, doing it in studio, boom, COVID. I don't know what I'm doing, but we figured it out. So we kind of looped the book back to 13 lessons that we talked about on the Be Better podcast with our guests over the last 2.5 years. And so each chapter is kind of like a little lesson learned. And it's, yes, you need a lawyer. Yes, you need an accountant. Yes, you need to hire staff, and you need to hire experts in certain fields and focus on what you do best. But it's also be empathetic and be fearless, and you can tie in purpose, have a higher purpose. I mean, that's definitely a huge thing for us, so that everyone kind of can steer that ship in the right direction, right? So, and I will say my personal favorite is be fearless. If you're an entrepreneur and you have fear, you're in the wrong business. You got to be fearless, and you got to be capable of making tough decisions, and knowing that if you make a wrong decision, that you can still pivot. It's not final. It's not finite. Yes, you may lose a little bit of money because you made a bad decision, but then you can always change gears and fix that, right that ship. So.
No, I love that. I think being fearless is incredibly important if you're an entrepreneur or in any business role. I'm wondering, how do you personally and professionally stay motivated to be better in the face of all these challenges in the world today? Obviously, there's a lot of negativity in the world, and there's a lot of things that can create this fear. So how do you personally and professionally navigate that and stay committed to these principles?
It's what's gotten me to where I'm at in my life. And I'd say I'm very happy with where I'm at in my life. I love my life. And so if you ask me the number one thing that got me here, there was a point in my life where I was fearful of everything. And I was scared to step out on my own and be an entrepreneur, scared of changing what I knew as normal life. And if I had not changed that mantra in my head, thought process in my head, I would never be where I'm at. And I'll just give a side story. I was scared of death for a long time. And, I'm not comfortable with death. I think we're all we all don't want to meet it too soon, right? So for a long time, I was like extremely scared of death, and to the point where I would have panic attacks when I'd get on a plane because I was so scared that this plane was going to go down. And let me tell you, having panic attacks on a plane when you're a traveling salesman is not a good recipe, right? It's not a good recipe. So I finally, through many different, meditation and journaling and things of that nature, yoga, I've been able to calm that down over the years. But to the point where I wanted to be fearless, and I wanted to laugh in the face of death. And I jumped out of a plane for my 40th birthday because I was like, I've always like the premise of just skydiving. Like, how can you be more free than that, right? You're flying, right? But I was like, but you could die, and you could what if your parachute doesn't open? What if, whatever, right? So I finally got up the guts to do it on my 40th, and I jumped out of a plane, and I jumped out of the plane and I screamed, "Fuck you, death," as I did it. Sorry if this is PG-13, then I just totally messed that up. But yeah, that was like what I did for my 40th birthday, because I wanted to prove to myself I could be fearless. And so anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that story. I guess that's how I've been fearless prior to and in my life going forward.
I love it. Quick side story. On my 30th, I went paragliding for similar reasons. So I'm right there with you, my friend.
Well, Grant, we're gonna get you to step up to that skydiving for the 40th. That's on the list.
Running off a mountain was a pretty big deal for me. I appreciate your vulnerability. I appreciate what you brought up with the divorce and your wife's pregnancy and skydiving. As you read the book, you dive into some pretty personal details about yourself. I'm wondering if you had any hesitancy or any fear as you were writing this book about sharing some of those more personal details.
So anyone that knows me knows I'm pretty much an open book. I'm very vulnerable and authentic. I'm going to tell you how I feel. I may not make the most friends with that attitude, but you always know where you stand with me. And that's always been how I've been in my sales career as well. I think it's one of the reasons why I've been so successful at what I do. So I never felt vulnerable sharing that as I was writing the book because it wasn't real. But I will say that the day of the book release, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, oh man, there's a lot of stuff in there and it's out there for the world. And it wasn't really like, my father's an alcoholic, was an alcoholic. I've been through a divorce, I've been fired. I've done a lot of things in my life and I'm not scared to share any of those things. I think, and the reason I brought up imposter syndrome earlier, I think what was really the most fearful is that like, I'm going to be judged and some people are going to read this book and be like, this book sucks. And Michael Kurland's story is terrible. And that's, I had to be okay with that. And I don't think I had prepared myself for being judged harshly. So, but I'm okay with it now. It took me like a day to like, all right, woosah, it's okay. You've shared this story a million times with hundreds of people. So, the new people that read it, maybe they like it, maybe they don't, and it's no different than your career. Like I said, I'm you either love me or you hate me, right? So
haters gonna hate.
Yeah.
Haters gonna hate. That's all we got to say with that. Couple of more questions, and then I do want to open it up for the audience Q&A. What are your goals with this book? What do you hope to accomplish, and how do you see it helping other entrepreneurs and leaders?
Yeah, good question, Grant. I had to figure that out for myself because at first we were just writing this book. So let me tell you, like initially, we started getting seen for all the awards we were winning through a bunch of different other podcasters in the industry. And I had a guy, Chris Shembra, who has also written a book. He had me on his podcast. We had just won Inc. 5000 top company. We had been on a Great Place to Work. And he was trying to interview a bunch of people from the Inc. 5000. And so we went on a show, talked about empathy, and his whole thing is gratitude. I'm doing it a disjustice, but he's very into gratitude. And so he had me on a show and he's like, I'm doing a podcast and I'm going to write a book and I'm going to go on this speaking tour. So that was like my initial goal, was to do podcast, book, and then become a public speaker. And what I've learned through the process of this is that I don't want to do public speaking. I just wanted to write the book. And what I want to write the book for, to answer your question, is to really help someone that was in my shoes 9 years ago. Someone who, is coming out now and wants to start a company. And for most of the millennials that in the workforce, they care more, as we all know, about purpose than they do compensation, right? It's maybe 50-150, something like that. So it's important for them to have a higher purpose. And so for the millennials that are going to be the next generation of entrepreneurs out there, they're going to be wanting to incorporate purpose into their company. And when I started, doing the Be Better program, I went to Habitat for Humanity and I said, hey, I want to start this 1-for-1 program where we donate a minute at a time through our employees for every service call we complete at Branded Group. And they told me, well, you can write a check for $5,000. And I'm like, you don't get it. I don't have $5,000 to write you a check, but I got employees that can definitely help you. So I really want to help the entrepreneurs that are out there that want to bring purpose from day one into their company and show them that it can be done. And if I can help one entrepreneur do that, then that's my goal for this book, in a very long-winded way of telling you and answering that question.
No, I love it. And I appreciate, your self-awareness and just general awareness of the world and the changing business landscape. So thank you for sharing. Two more questions before we move into audience Q&A. Do you have a business hero, or is there anyone who you really look up to and someone whose leadership style you try to emulate?
It's funny, you sent pre-show like some of the questions that we were going to talk about, and this was the one that was like, shit, I hope he doesn't ask me that one, because honestly, like, I have mentors, but I don't have, like, I'm not like, oh, John Mackey's my business hero. Sorry, CCI. I like John Mackey and I like everything he stands for, but I'd be lying if I said I follow everything and look up to him. I would say like Bill Pagnato has been my mentor since I moved to California. He helped me just really get into the places to be in facility maintenance management, construction maintenance management in California. Took me under his wing when he didn't have to. And Moses Carrasco and Joe Scarretto were my old bosses at the last company, and they showed me so much about what I do. So I wouldn't be where I'm at with the help of those three gentlemen.
I love it. And then last question before we move into the audience Q&A. Conscious capitalism has four main tenets, and you've touched on this a little bit already, but higher purpose, stakeholder orientation, conscious leadership, and conscious culture. I'm just hoping you could elaborate a little bit on how Branded Group really utilizes those four tenets of conscious capitalism, and just provide some specific examples of what do you actually do in regards to higher purpose, stakeholder orientation, conscious leadership, and conscious culture.
So, I mean, higher purpose, like we talked about, be better is our mantra, right? Everyone knows that's everywhere. So we try to live and breathe that. It has definitely become harder as we are in 19 different states with 160 plus employees, but that's my job now, right? I'm not selling. I'm trying to make sure that we can keep this culture focused, and, segueing myself into stakeholder orientation. When we put our values together, we actually had a workshop in the office, and all we had at the time was be better. That's it. And we sat down with every employee that we had, and we only had 26 at the time, but to this day, like 5 years later, I will say of those 26, probably 10 of them still work for us. So they sat around. It was a 2-day workshop. It was long, grueling for them, but it was very, very rewarding at the end, because they put all of our values together, and they voted on them, and they put them together. And that's still the values we have to this day. Conscious leadership, I think if what I'm talking about right now isn't that, then what is, right? We have a program now where we still have our 1-for-1 program. We're giving 1 meal for every service call that we complete. It used to be an hour, a minute of service time through Habitat for Humanity. I would have had to have hired full-time volunteer employees to complete all the service that we'd have to do to get that done. So, side note, I actually had an employee this past weekend pitch that idea to me, like, hey, how about I just be your full-time service person? And I was like, we don't pay people to do volunteer work, but we do, but we don't do it full-time. So yeah, now we donate a meal to Feeding America and Second Harvest Food Pantry, which is the local food bank out here in Orange County, but then Feeding America across the country, because we're in 19 different states. So we donate a meal to them for every service call we complete. So that's kind of our conscious leadership. We also are affiliated with Orange Coast Keepers, which is beach cleanups along the coastline, providing clean water. And we're still involved with Habitat for Humanity, whose goal is to give affordable housing to all. And conscious culture, I mean, this is what we do on a daily basis. I just got off my HR meeting beforehand, and we were talking about the Priority Center, who's another another nonprofit that we're affiliated with out here in Orange County. And what they do is, they do a lot of things, but they provide help for, kids that have been sexually assaulted, among other things, by adults. And so we're volunteering with them at their place where they bring the kids when this has all happened. So what used to happen with them is 19 different, DA and police would interview them after this terrible thing had happened. And now they'd have to relive that 19 times over and over again. Now they just videotape it once, and everyone uses that as the evidence. And so we're, getting ready to volunteer there. And we were talking about that on our last call. So it's very near and dear. I mean, it's something that I live and breathe, and we do on a weekly basis. And we're always looking for new ways to get involved in and around the community. So I hope those are acceptable.
They pass inspection, don't worry. One of the things you mentioned, which I think is so important, I was a teacher prior to this role, and as a teacher, it's really easy to go into a classroom and say, here are the classroom rules. Everyone needs to agree to these. And even with kids see right through that, and they're like, I have no buy-in. I have no skin in the game. And it's far more difficult to, enforce classroom rules if you don't have any buy-in. So something you said, which I really appreciate, is you sat down with your employees and you said, look, what does this company stand for? What are our values? What organizations do we want to support? And I'm sure that your employees, whether they have said it or not, I'm sure that they appreciate the fact that you actually listened to them and really took their input as you were building this.
And not only that, but having those 10 employees that still work for us to be able to bridge that gap for the new 150 employees that work for us, and let them know, like, this is what we stand for as a company. And it's cool to volunteer on a Saturday. It's cool to do this. The company takes care of us. Like, there's a sense of pride with what we do overall as a company from the employees and the buy-in that we get from them. And sidebar, I used to be a substitute teacher. That was actually the first thing I ever did. And 100%, Grant, I learned early, only substitute for elementary school. And B, first thing you do when you substitute for elementary school is you walk in and you write the word recess on the board, and you tell them every time they act up, you erase the letter. And if there's no letters left, there's no recess. And you would be surprised how well those students perform for me. So
I am not at all surprised, to be perfectly honest with you. I spent 6 of my 7 years in education teaching elementary, so I get it. As audience members use the Q&A feature to send in questions here, I would love to hear a little bit more about how the book changed over time. So you started writing this book. First of all, how long did it take you to complete this? And how did it change from, what you set out to write versus what the actual final product was? And audience members, feel free to use the Q&A feature as well during Michael's answer.
Yeah, so this was the COVID project, right? Like, COVID hit, and me and the PR team, we sat down, we're like, let's write this book. We had always kind of bandied it about in the background, but there was never, when was there a good time, right? Okay, we got a good time. We got some downtime. So we started writing this book, and we did weekly meetings, me and my ghostwriter, Jennifer Cabello. Thank you for everything that you did for me. I hope you're on this call. And we did hour-long sessions, and we would talk about these tenets and these lessons learned. And the first iteration of the book was definitely, the first iteration, and we made changes. And that's when we decided, let's link this back to the podcast, which we were already in progress doing. And, let's tie each lesson into like one of the episodes so that it can all tie together. And so then the second iteration of the book came out, and this is 2 years later, right? And I think we, March of this year is when we finally had the final copy, and everyone loved it. And it definitely changed a lot from day 1 to day 720 or whatever it was.
So final question before we wrap up here. For anyone on this call who is considering writing a book, in the early stages of writing a book, what advice do you give an aspiring author? What advice would you give someone who is setting out to write a book?
I think be yourself, right? I don't know how to write a book from a expertise, subject matter expertise kind of thing, right? that's very like ingrained in analytics and numbers and hard data and science, right? I'm kind of in the gray area, right? That's where I operate. I'm very good at it. So for me, if you're writing a book like this, just be authentic and be yourself, and don't be shy to be vulnerable, right? Because I hope if you guys are listening, you guys do buy this book, you hear it in this voice now, right? When you're reading it, and now you see this vulnerable, authentic guy who's just trying to get a good message across, right? So just be that. Don't try to be something you're not.
I love it. I know that's my biggest takeaway from this call is the importance of being authentic, being vulnerable, and being willing to just connect with people on a human level. So I know we are coming up on the end of our time here. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Michael, thank you again for sharing your experience with us, your insights with us. Congratulations on the book launch. I want to give you the final word here before I launch into a couple of just concluding announcements. Any parting words of wisdom you'd like to share?
No words of wisdom, just total gratitude for everyone. Thank you again, Grant CCI, for putting this on, letting me be a part of it. And thank you all for taking some time out of your day to listen to me talk for a couple minutes. Appreciate it.
We did have one more question just sneak in here just before the whistle. So you got time for one more?
Hey, I'm at your mercy.
All right, sounds good. When it comes to empathy growth, are there any particular tools or practices that you use that really work best for you?
I mean, yes, journaling. I mentioned it before. Journaling and meditation were really, really big things in my life that sometimes you ebb and flow with them and you get away, and I can always tell when I'm getting a little wonky in my life because I haven't been journaling or meditating or both or yogaing. And so those three things kind of keep me grounded and centered. And I highly recommend them, especially to people who are entrepreneurs running your own companies, because, what are you doing it all for? At the end of the day, if you're running around trying to, sell as much as you can and make as much money as you can, and you don't have time for yourself or to take care of yourself, and, you end up with a heart attack at 50, or you're on Xanax because you can't, regulate yourself properly. I mean, I'm not saying Xanax isn't, a useful thing, but if that's the reason why, because you have so much anxiety because you're not taking care of yourself on that angle of things, then, you really need to take care of yourself. So gratitude, journaling, yoga, meditation, that's helped me grow my empathy practice.
It's interesting too, because as you're talking about the importance of mindfulness, yoga, meditation, I'm wondering, you came up with this list of 13 ideas. Is there any significance to the 13, or did you consider doing 7, 5, 3?
It was, we came up with 13 based on, like I said earlier, focusing it back to the podcast. And I think they're all pertinent. And I was born on the 13th, so it was a nice round number for me when we all kind of huddled together and made it sound right. I'm like, 13, everyone hates 13 or loves 13. So again, a polarizing number. I'm a polarizing guy. Go with it. Yeah.
Hey, it works. I love it. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. To help us out with our future programming, please take a moment to provide your feedback. There is a brief survey in the chat. We would really appreciate sharing your thoughts with us. It should take less than a minute to do. If you are new to conscious capitalism and interested in learning more, please visit consciouscapitalism.org for more information about our movement and our organization. We do have a number of upcoming virtual gatherings as well. All of those can be found through consciouscapitalism.org. If you're an executive who is currently implementing conscious practices in your business, we want you to explore our growing support system of like-minded leaders in our Senior Leader Network. Michael Kurland is part of the Senior Leader Network. We have close to 200 SLN members right now, and we are looking to continue growing that. So please visit consciouscapitalism.org/ senior leaders to learn more and join. Again, I mentioned we have a number of upcoming virtual gatherings, which you do not have to be part of the Senior Leader Network to attend. So we encourage you to attend those. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our upcoming events.